but this vast conglomerate of false attitudes and false economic policies and these terrible physical ambitions of human beings who can't be happy unless they're running other human beings. All of this, nature said, not that way. And it's about time that we begin to think in terms of letting the inside come out. We don't have to read it out of books. We don't have to do anything except, as Thomas à Kempis pointed out, just allow the Spirit to work, to allow the presence of the divine power in ourselves to express itself without putting all kinds of limitations upon that expression. If we will allow ourselves to be good, we will discover that we have always been good and didn't know it. If we allow ourselves to be peaceful, we will know we always wanted peace, but didn't know how to get it. And the only way to get rid of complexity is to stop being complex. The more we try to make more complexity for solution, the worse it's going to get. We have probably another 100 years before we get all these things simmered down, but some of them can be handled rather quickly. They can be handled by anyone who honestly believes in the reality of a deity that loves its creation. If God is merciful, and we all assume that deity is a parent, if we do this, we will find that it is quite conceivable that we can allow the parent in ourselves to come through. Each individual is endowed with a divine factor. And it is this divine factor which we have ignored since we were pushed out of Eden in the first place, or whatever was the equivalent of Eden. At least we were pushed out of something. And we have never allowed this reality to take over. We have tried to, we have prayed, we have asked help, we have done all these things, but we have in some way not created the proper atmosphere. And the reason why we pray, and our prayers are sometimes answered, is because we were justly entitled to those answers. When they're not answered, there's some reason why they're not answered. And that reason isn't that God was overlooking us that day. It is rather the fact that where we deserve, we get. Where we don't deserve, we continue to suffer. And whenever we ask to be relieved of a burden that we should solve ourselves, the burden will stay with us. But if we have so lived and so conducted ourselves that we have outgrown that burden, by legitimate means, it will be lifted. Everywhere the change has to start within ourselves, and has to move from there outward to the world of our environment. We're going to have to look over the problems of our homes and the family life. We're going to have to discover what constitutes an acceptable family situation in terms of divine life. We're going to have to realize that a family must live under law, divine law, and that this divine law can be administered on a human level with justice for all and love of God dominant in it. We can find any answer we want if we really want the answer. But if we merely want an excuse to continue making the same mistake, we will go through one cycle of depressions and inflations after another. We are beginning to realize the fear of nuclear war. We are realizing that we created something we didn't understand and never will probably understand. We created a very convenient means for self-elimination. And this creation was supported by some of the worst thinking the world has ever done. But on the other hand, it hasn't happened. And now we find a gradual awareness coming that it shouldn't happen. The inside is beginning to speak. The inside is speaking in many ways and in many places. It is still a small voice for most. But the small voice may be small in terms of society, but that small voice, when it gets a little louder in us, is the most powerful force in the world. So that we have always had and always will have within ourselves the capacity to be right, and by following that capacity to make the world what it should be. It isn't necessary for us to go through all of the privations and trials and sufferings that's figured the past. Look at this moment. There's in trouble in every major country of the world. Everything is proving conclusively they're doing it wrong. Yet with all the force we have, we try to continue to do it wrong, or make a few minor tucks in our mistakes so that they won't look quite so bad, or maybe get a little bit of something better into them. We should be studying definitely that the whole path of humanity since the 19th century in the Western world has been toward materialism, toward the complete ignoring of the ethics of the divine purpose. We are perfectly willing to admit that the eye of a housefly is so incredible that we will never understand it. But we are unwilling to accept the fact that there's something out there that does understand it and did create it. And we've got to find out ways in which we can do that which is right. We must become in our turn pens in the hands of a ready writer. We must find a way to come back to the simple facts of life, to live as we should have lived, and to live in a way in which we can spend the years of our lives in a peaceful relationship. Now, what might be one of the rewards of that? I think it probably one of the rewards would simply be that the last 10 or 15 years of life will be happier, which we will no longer be lonely people. We will no longer be exiled from society simply by age. We will be also able to reap the rewards of good thinking, good planning, and good understanding. Sometime these birds have to come back to roost, and what we do wrong will ultimately do wrong for us, or make things very difficult. So we do realize very definite that in this life in which we are now involved, that a major breakthrough is necessary. In this patching up of things, we mean to try to do a little better, but keep all the sins and complexities and mistakes that we have learned to consider essential. We feel it essential to have bad television programs. Why, we don't know. We feel that seemingly that it's essential that our mail be smothered with advertising. Nobody really cares too much, but it all bears witness to a basic failure, a failure of the integrity in people, and a failure of the insight which causes us to stay away from that which is not good. We just pass it over and say, well, that's the way it is, and go on doing what we intended to do in the first place. So now we are on another emergency. An emergency which can only be solved by some really serious thinking. Now, if this solution required a new currency, or required a new system of government to be imposed upon man, it would be different. But we've tried that. It never worked. We cannot be governed by anything but the spirit within ourselves and be safe. And the spirit within ourselves must not be confused with our ambitions and our avarice and our egotism and egocentricity. The voice within ourselves is always honest. And the moment it appears to be dishonest, we must suspect that we are getting the wrong message. That behind the self-message that we all have, this inner ambition, this ambition for wealth, for power, for security, for happiness, for health, all these things, if this voice alone speaks, it continues to fight for that which the Spirit doesn't even want. It is necessary, therefore, to transcend this voice entirely, to give up all self-centeredness and selfishness, and listen to the voice that, as the compass says, comes to us in meekness. Harmlessness is therefore a form of meekness. It is the individual admitting that from the cradle to the grave and before and after, the individual is a child in the keeping of a universal mystery. That behind all of us is a parental pattern by which we will be protected if we protect it. It will give us the needs if we will give it the soul. If we will live according to the rules of life, the right rule of the right life, we have nothing to fear. And it is far better to fail here in monetary things and succeed in the universe than it is to succeed here and fail in the universe. For the simple reason, this is a moment. The universe is forever. This is an embodiment which will pass away. But the mystery is an eternal life that goes on forever. Therefore, we are either citizens of this embodiment with all its limitations, to be born and die with it, or we are citizens of eternity, part of a pattern so vast, so wonderful, so beautiful, that once we have experienced it as an adventure in our own souls, we can never lose it again. And now, for the first time, the human being is beginning to look around and becoming aware of the fallacy of error, the fallacy of selfishness, the fallacy of pretense, and the fallacy of building a life here. We can rent a house here for a lifetime, but we can't build a life here. Our life is built for us in eternity. It is something that we will always have. But we can obliterate and mutilate its manifestations through the misuse of the powers and privileges that we feel that we have. Therefore, I think these little people over there in India have something to tell us. They are not theology-minded, but they do believe in one eternal spirit of good, and that man becomes as nearly perfect as he can become when he serves that spirit of good and becomes like it. When the goodness comes through him, he is growing. When the goodness comes to him, he may abuse it. But when it comes through him into his own life, into his own daily experiences, it becomes a great and wonderful power for the transformation of society. And each one now is in the presence of lessons about this. Between now and the end of the year, there will be more lessons. And they will call for a very great thoughtfulness and a great realization and the fact that we can't talk ourselves out of a dilemma, that we must work together to solve the dilemma. There are problems in human society that cannot be solved by laws. They have to be solved by love. They have to be solved by understanding, by sharing, by brotherhood and comradeship. And until we find that out, we are missing the message that comes from within ourselves and upon which we must always depend. Therefore, I think this life of harmlessness that these people believe in is very useful to us to think about. I think it tells us something that we can start with right away. The next time someone lifts the phone, be sure that harmlessness is in your voice. You may not want the product. You may feel it's an indirection and an injustice. But actually, it is something that you can simply and quietly ignore, but never hurt. Never hurt another. Never scandalize another. Never carry criticisms. Never do these things that are now becoming obviously more offensive. Now we are having books published every day, publishing the private lives of other citizens. This is not because we are great lovers of truth. It's because the royalties are considerable. This is not something from the inside. We do not have the right to judge anything. We have a right to be a little critical of ourselves if the need arises. But judge not lest you be judged. For as you judge others, so shall it be judged unto you. There are laws of kindness, and those have been ignored for centuries by most. But the few who are still kindly, or have been kindly, are the immortals on the pages of history. They are the ones that will never be forgotten. While the big and ambitious competitors will be forgotten very quickly. In fact, there are a great many people now who can't tell you who were the principal people in World War II. Children growing up do not even know of these people. But it will be a very long time before they come to forget a few of the noble souls that have helped to make life worthwhile. It is always